Let me read to you a passage from the 6th chapter of St. John's Gospel, verses 16 to 21. It's the Gospel for Saturday of the second week of Eastertide. St. John writes, "When evening time came, the disciples of Jesus went down to the sea, got into a boat, and went across for Capernaum. It was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come back to them. A strong wind blew, and the sea began to stir. They had rowed some 25 or 30 furlongs when they saw Jesus walking on the sea and approaching the boat. They were afraid, but he said to them, 'It is I, do not fear.' Then they took him on board willingly enough, and very soon the boat reached the shore to which they were going." That's from John chapter 6 verses 16 to 21. It speaks of help in the storm. What do I mean? Well, James George Janos, better known as Jesse Ventura, once said in a Playboy interview that, and I quote, "Organized religion is a sham and a crutch for weak-minded people who need strength in numbers." Ventura, in a different context, explained his statement in a way that toned it down, but it is a common perception nevertheless. Religion is a crutch, which is to say that the persuasion that God exists and cares for us is nothing more than a self-serving illusion with no objective reality. It is like the doll that an elderly woman who has largely lost her mind is given to hug. The doll serves as an illusion which consoles the woman in her wintry situation. There have been all kinds of variants of this description of religion. Karl Marx looked on religion as an opiate. It drugged the masses out of their constant pain in the midst of their material oppression. They had the consoling thought of a caring God who would reward them with heaven at the end of their hopeless trials. The thought of God, religion, was the one thing holding their material progress back, because it led them to accept their lot and not cast off the yoke of their upper-class oppressors. Religion was a crutch, the opium of the masses. What are we to say of this? Well, to begin with, a crutch is what a crippled or wounded person needs. A person who is crippled, but who thinks he is not crippled at all, and so makes no use of a crutch of some kind, he is the person who is suffering from an illusion. I can imagine a person suffering from great pain due to an injury being assisted by a controlled use of opium, in the way any modern pain-relieving medication might. For instance, in a rudimentary situation where a leg has to be amputated, the taking of opium may be life-saving because of its control of pain. In such a case, opium would not be an illusion. On the contrary, it may be absolutely illusory for a person to think he can cope with the pain unassisted. The fact is that to a fair extent, modern Western man is under the illusion that there is no need of God, and that this world is all that there is. The current illusion is not that there is a God who cares despite the pain of life, but that all that is worth living for is what can be touched and enjoyed. That's the illusion that's current and common. It is an illusion if only because of the ever-looming spectre of decline and death. Man cannot rest secure if this world is all that there is. It is an illusion to think that he can get by without any reference to the unseen. The plain fact is that he is extremely vulnerable. At any point in his life a storm can arise. His health can suddenly begin to fail. He can find his work beyond him and thereafter bringing on him various reversals. He can lose his friends and near relations. His spouse or child could die. In a radical sense, his life is absolutely contingent. It need never have been, and it can be snuffed out in an instant. It is therefore the most rational thing of all to cry out for assistance from the unseen, from that which is beyond our contingent and vulnerable world. But the marvel is that God has intervened, so that we can rely on him with the assurance of sight. God became man and dwelt among us, and as St. John says in his Gospel, we saw his glory. We saw it, he says, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. In our Gospel passage today that I read earlier, the disciples find themselves in a situation that exemplifies and symbolizes the human situation. They are in a storm and in difficulties. And precisely in this situation, they see Jesus coming towards them. As we heard, it was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come back to them. A strong wind blew and the sea began to stir. They had rowed some 25 or 30 furlongs when they saw Jesus walking on the sea and approaching the boat. They were afraid, but he said to them, "It is I, do not fear." And they took him on board willingly enough, and very soon the boat reached the shore to which they were going. John chapter 6 verses 16 to 21. It was not an illusory crutch that they saw coming to them across the water in the midst of the strong wind. It was not an opiate being offered them. It was an objective reality. Christ came to them across the water, offering strength, security, consolation and safety. The result of God's revelation is that we now know that reality is ultimately kind. It is compassionate, merciful, caring. Reality is ultimately love. God, who is this love, means to take us to himself, where all will be eternally secure in his love. Any person who feels secure while repudiating the idea of God is suffering from an illusion. His crutch will be his limited and failing senses and the world which he sees and on which he depends. That will be his crutch and his opiate. The most clear-sighted thing a man can do is acknowledge his entire dependence on his Creator and resolve to live in communion with him by doing his will. There are no illusions there. The saint is the one who lives in the light, whereas the one who is far from God dwells at most in the twilight. It is imperative that he approach the only one who is the light of the world, and then live in his friendship.